An interesting backstory.
I think it's important that everybody knows about the Wizard of Oz.
A professional with decades of experience in her field.
I'm a psychotherapist who works pretty much exclusively with law enforcement officers, as well as other first responders.
Strong opinions and a definite point of view.
What people see on the streets, this job, is not normal.
Brutally honest and funny.
When I get a call in the middle of the night and they've been drinking beer, they're normally crying over a relationship. When they're drinking Jack, they get on the phone and they start off with, "Hey babe."
She identifies problems, probes, pokes, and makes you think.
So if something happens to your family, which is truly your biggest fear, and you haven't thought about every single potential of what could go wrong, then you feel like you failed.
She has her own special style.
You're either part of the problem or part of the solution. Pick a side.
Welcome to StephTherapy911 with Stephanie Samuels.
Hello and welcome to StephTherapy911 with Stephanie Samuels. Tonight is unique. It's unique in the fact that we have a Canadian with us. More unique in the fact that that my introduction to him was through a photo and a follow-up and an email, and a gracious man who answered before COVID started. And tonight I'm not going to share Daniel Sundahl with everybody, but I'm also going to share his artwork and kind of how he ended up using the artwork to help heal himself, heal others, and continues to offer that. And one of the kindest things is I had reached out, and I don't know if you remember this, Daniel, you probably will. They had reached out for CopLine, told you kind of who we were, and that there's a picture. I'm going to go now. I'm going to share a screen. I'm going to show everybody what that picture is. That is this picture of the officer holding the gun on the phone. And I had asked Daniel, after I told him who I was, if I could use that picture. And he immediately responded and he said, absolutely. He said, it's as long as it's being used for good, and that no royalties, no anything, that it was his responsibility and to get that word out and to help all first responders. So for my audience that's not familiar with Daniel and his work, I am going to share a screen and I am going to go through some of these amazing pictures. But I want you to get to know Daniel as I get to know him tonight. He and I have spoken for about 5 minutes beforehand. He and I have had conversation. I've asked him to do some work for me for CopLine. And yet the other night I was scrolling through Facebook, and there was this picture that clearly was a Dan Sun picture, which is what his gallery goes by. And I was reading about a resiliency course that a friend of his was teaching on a subject that is truly near and dear to me, on death notifications. And this is just one of those things that in my 30 plus years of doing clinical work has been the most difficult for my officers, for all of my first responders, is how do you do a notification that will change somebody's life forever, that will stop time, that they will remember what they ate for breakfast that day. They remember what they're wearing, what was cooking in the kitchen. That moment will be frozen, and so will you be. And the gravity of that experience. And and when I saw this course, it was just, I wanted to throw every one of my guys into this course, because I have never had one of them say that they were trained on how to do this. And then you look at all your pictures and they all tell such a depth, such a story. So kind of take me back. I saw that you began your career in 1996. Is that accurate?
That's right. Yeah, I became an EMT in 1996.
So what made you decide that you wanted to be an EMT? And in Canada, I know a lot of my EMTs, so that you can be an EMT and not necessarily a firefighter, or it's a dual career. Kind of also help me understand if anything's different or what's similar up in Canada.
Yeah, it is a little bit different here, and it varies depending on what part of the country that you're in. So in my case, I'm a paramedic now. I'm a paramedic firefighter, but also in the city that I live in, you can be either just a firefighter or just a paramedic. But the service that I work for, we're an integrated service. So I'm a paramedic and a firefighter. So I'll do one shift on the ambulance, then my next shift will be on the fire truck. I think it's a really good model personally for longevity. I think it's a great model. And I really enjoyed it. I've been doing that for almost 20 years now at that department.
So 96, 2006. So that leaves us some wiggle room from 1996 to 2001.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been doing it. So you've been clearly involved in this for longer than you've been at your department. So what drove you to being an EMT?
I was working, and this is a funny story. Well, not really. But I was working I was training. I was living in the Cayman Islands, and I was training to be a dive master.
Oh, so you went to the Cayman Islands because you wanted to be a dive master, or you just wanted to get the hell out of Canada?
I just wanted to get the hell out of Canada and live in the Caribbean for a while. So I actually got hired as a bartender. So I was working there as a bartender, and everyone in the Cayman Islands dives. So that's what me and my friends did, and we really enjoyed it. And eventually I wanted to explore that further and got the education, became a dive master. Part of that training is medic diver. So we learn how to rescue people from the water and how to save drowning people and with scuba gear on. And then we learn to do CPR and, basic first aid. And I was coming home from that course, from part of that medical training, and I saw this guy get smoked by this giant dump truck. And I got so excited. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go help this guy. I learned how to, do CPR. So I pulled over, I ran up to this guy, and this guy was folded in half. His foot was up by his face and he was gurgling blood, and I didn't know what to do, but I was so excited. And I thought, wow, that's weird. That's really weird that I got so excited about this emergency when most people were running away and screaming and not knowing what to do. I just ran right up there to this guy. I knew how to do C-spine, or I was trained how to do C-spine and control. So I grabbed the guy's neck and just waited for the ambulance to come. And I just got so excited about it. So that's kind of when I first got the first idea of, maybe I should be a paramedic if this kind of stuff really gets my heart going and I really enjoy it, which is weird.
Was that your first, what I would consider, traumatic incident?
Yes, but I wouldn't call it traumatic as in, most of us, when you say traumatic incident, there's a negative connotation to it. But for me, no, that was a positive experience for me.
I'm watching your face talk about this.
Yeah, right.
There is nothing that shows traumatic, but I will tell you that for most people, that certainly would be.
Oh, the people that were there were horrified. And I think I can speak for most of my peers, emergency workers, that, we're a little bit twisted that way where, we say what a good call is. And, you ask any paramedic what's a good call. And if you're not in the industry, you'd be horrified what we consider a good call. Right.
So do you know the outcome of that individual?
No idea. The ambulance came, they unfolded him, put him in the ambulance and went to the hospital. And I got back in my Jeep and drove home and I'm like, oh, that was awesome. Which again is really kind of weird.
Because right? I do think that you need to be wired a certain way.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And if you're not wired, you will not do well.
Yeah. And I think when I was pretty early on in my life, I decided that I want to live my life to the fullest. I want to have the most experiences that I can so that when I die, I'm going to have no regrets. And I could die tomorrow and know that I've done tons of stuff and I will not regret anything I've done. So, and that's how I got to the Cayman Islands in the first place. I had this opportunity. I'm like, yep, let's go. So when I started thinking about being an emergency worker, I'm thinking, hey, that is living life to its fullest, in my opinion. And some people, when they look at my artwork, that I often get asked, Daniel, why do you continue to do this work if your artwork is so depressing and sad and horrible? And I'm like, hey man, we experience, we are on the cutting edge. It is the biggest show on earth, what emergency workers do. And that's what I want. And that's what I think what most of us want. So that's why I kind of got into it, and why I thought, being a paramedic is really going to satisfy that goal of mine to really live life to the fullest. And it has not been disappointing, that's for sure.
When did you realize? We talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. And yet most people certainly, they know something's going on, but they don't know that there's this name called post-traumatic stress disorder that fits all those different pieces that are going on. And that I know that most of my guys feel like, I can't have PTSD. That's for the Vietnam vets.
Mm-hmm.
That's for somebody who's far worse off than I am. And I think that's one of the barriers to seeking help, as well as a whole lot of other things. But kind of this sense of, no matter how bad what I've experienced is, somebody has experienced something far worse, and this diagnosis is safe for them. Mm-hmm. So if you don't mind kind of talking about your kind of road that
Sure.
led you to that understanding, and what that is, and what you've done with it.
Sure. Well, in my case, and in many other cases that people have told me, my peers have told me, I didn't know anything was wrong. And that's kind of the scary part. And often we don't, and what I've learned now is that the process changes your brain chemistry, and you lose the capacity to realize how much trouble you're in. In my case, I was planning my death. I had a suicide plan, and I thought that was totally fine. I would go to work, be a good paramedic, and think, okay, when I drive home today, I'm going to drive off the road or drive into a truck or something, and still be completely functional. When I think about it now, that's absolutely crazy. But I didn't know the trouble that I was in. I didn't know that I was having a problem. I didn't know. I thought that the issues I was having with my marriage, I thought it was her fault. The issues I was having at work, I thought it was their fault. I never thought there was something with me. So for me, it was scary because I didn't know that I was even in trouble, because I lost the capacity to realize that. So what happened for me is that we went to our platoon went and saw this psychologist talk about PTSD, and he was doing this talk for everybody in the city, not just our fire department. And as he went through and went through all these signs and symptoms, I connected with all of them. And the one thing that really kind of made me realize what was happening is that he told us that, most people think that PTSD is, you're normal, and then you have this one incident, and then you're impaired after that one incident. And he says a lot of his patients he diagnosed with PTSD that don't have that one traumatic incident. It's a long, like years of exposure.
Yeah.
Right. And then I realized, hey, I have all these symptoms. I don't really have one call I have lots of calls that really stick in my mind. And that's the motivation for a lot of my artwork. But after that lecture, that really, I got checked out. I went and got evaluated, and the psychologist at that time said I had PTSD. And then that's how my recovery started, because I didn't know that there was anything wrong with me.
Did your marriage survive that?
Yes, because my wife is wonderful. It almost didn't.
Tough. It's tough.
Yeah, and she's great. She's a yoga teacher, and she does yoga for trauma. So she specializes in yoga therapy and trauma-informed yoga, which is great. And often when we travel and I speak at conferences and exhibit my artwork, she'll come with me and she'll offer free yoga sessions for these mostly EMS conferences. But so we do that all over the world, which is great. So yeah, she's wonderful, and she knows if when I come home from work, if I'm really quiet, she knows just to just to love me and give me my space. And she knows that I just need a little bit of time. So she's great that way.
So, resiliency.
Mm-hmm.
Resiliency to you, if you had to put the Daniel definition on a screen, what would be your definition of resiliency? Because we hear about resiliency all the time, and I think there's many different definitions, and I think some of them are rather interesting. So
Yeah. Again, I'm just going to speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but for me, resiliency is something that you gain through experience. I don't think it's something you can learn. I think it's something you can be made aware of. I think it's great for new people coming in as emergency services to do resiliency training, to be aware of what it is. But I don't think you truly gain, in my case, I didn't gain resiliency until I've been through the shit, so to speak. Like I don't, like if nothing's happened to you, then how can you have resiliency in my opinion? So for me, resiliency is something that you gain through experience and surviving it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nothing against resiliency training. There's a lot of courses out there, which I think is wonderful because it's bringing awareness, but there's a zillion different definitions of resiliency. What does it mean really? Right. So it's a word that's really thrown around a lot.
And I talk about the difference between resiliency and post-traumatic growth.
Oh, great. I love that topic. Yeah.
And I think that to me, at least, is where that line separates, so that the resiliency is established from having been through different things. And I think the best example of post-traumatic growth was so that you've got people living in California on the San Andreas Fault. And you know what the San Andreas Fault is.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got your first responder that's living on the San Andreas Fault, and all of a sudden there it is, the 8.9. And there's the first responder. The first responder's got the MREs in the basement. They've got water, they've got cans, they've got propane. They have been prepping since the day they bought that house.
Mm-hmm.
Their next door neighbors are paralyzed, absolutely cannot function, cannot believe that this could happen. And so our first responder, this is resiliency. This is something that they have had, that they are grabbing from the past, are able to function. And I will go beyond functioning. They typically thrive in these conditions.
Yeah.
They just don't function. Mm-hmm. And the person that was living next door, the only hope is post-traumatic growth, is mm-hmm. that their growth now comes from this experience. And then over time, should they continue to be exposed to other situations, that resiliency piece that then gets instilled.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of tell me about post-traumatic growth, because you said you love the topic, as do I, because mm-hmm. I think it's so important on so many different levels and really not talked about a whole lot. Talk about PTSD, which seems to be everybody's favorite toy these days.
Mm-hmm.
But that growth portion is so important, because I feel like if you have PTSD, you've got the stigma.
Yeah.
And this is now the worst thing in the world. But yet, if we said that this is really post-traumatic growth, that you get to use all of these experiences now to truly flourish, what a wonderful kind of bend on that. So, mm-hmm. so I'm interested in hearing kind of what you're
I think, I love the topic of post-traumatic growth because it's a positive topic. It's this silver lining around this dark cloud. And, when we talk about PTS and mental trauma and PTSD and all, like there's such a negative, when people first started talking about PTSD, I'd go to these conferences about I'd be so depressed after, because people would go up there, they would talk, yeah, I'm a firefighter. This is what happened to me. I was suicidal. My life sucks. Thanks. And they leave. And I'm like, oh God, I feel like shit now. I'm like, now, and that'd be like 5 or 6 people. I'm like, oh, this is horrible. So for me, I think the difference between resiliency. So when I talk about my experiences and what happened to me, but I focus on post-traumatic growth. And if we want to talk more about the symposium that I put on I
would love to.
That's the focus, is post-traumatic growth. We're focusing on how the shit you went through made you a better person. Right. So I think for like resiliency, I think if we go to the idea of, let's say the earthquake again. So there's a big earthquake in California. And then after that, how quickly you get back. So this is your normal, and then the earthquake, and now you're impaired. You're like, holy shit, that was horrible.
Right.
I think resiliency is how fast you get to this line. How quick emergency workers, man, we're up there during the event.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, this is our norm.
And you're going up, because this is where you start to really thrive.
Yeah. So, but post-traumatic growth is because of that experience, you could go up here. Right. So now, because of that and the work that you've had to do to overcome that and to go higher, you can rewire your brain and become better than you were even before that tragic event.
Absolutely.
And that is, for all these people that are struggling, and I understand that there's many different levels of impairment where, people are dysfunctional, and it's not just a matter of, hey, just, think of post-traumatic growth and get better. Of course it's a lot more than that. And I'm a strong advocate for professional, cognitive therapy and lots of different therapy, whatever makes you better, go out and get it. But I think if you do that, and in my case, I had to rewire my brain. It wasn't easy, but because of that, I'm a different person I was before my diagnosis. And I'm in this post-traumatic growth phase now. And this is a funny example of post-traumatic growth, but if you think of any superhero or lots of superheroes, you think of Superman, or you think of Batman, who sees his parents get murdered, and now he's going to become this crime fighter, this billionaire crime fighter, because of that trauma he saw. Or Spider-Man, who sees his uncle get murdered, he's going to become a crime fighter because of that traumatic experience. And a lot of religious beliefs are there's no growth without suffering. I don't know if that's true. I'm not going to voluntarily whip myself so that I become a better person. But, when I speak to my peers, and I know that a lot of the people that look at my artwork or follow my page or, get my books and listen to my lectures, they're struggling. They're in a tough spot. But there's an opportunity there. If you do the work, if you make that decision that, yeah, I'm going to take my life back, get the work done, there's an opportunity to be better than you were before. And I know lots and lots of people that have done that are thriving now and are in that post-traumatic growth phase because of the trauma they experienced.
It's, I like that you talk about that. It's not uncommon that the way that people get to me is that obviously they've experienced something, because it's very rare that a first responder has thought, I think I'm just going to do therapy because I've always wanted to explore myself. It's about the last place they want to end up. So typically they've been involved in a critical incident. And I have always said that what became unique in my practice is that that it wasn't about getting them to the pre-incident functioning level, that most of the time they ended up leaving my practice better than they had been prior to the incident that brought them in. Because that understanding of where they've been, how they use their experiences in a positive vein, not a paralyzing.
Yeah.
And it's really, if somebody had asked me the definition of therapy, I'd tell them that it is truly tolerating the discomfort of change. That if you can't tolerate the discomfort of change, there's no reason to seek help.
Yeah.
And sometimes, when you're in that incredibly negative mindset, that's the comfort zone.
That's their identity.
And that is, I really, you and I kind of touched on that, and I really want to spend time, because so few people will talk about that, is that negative mindset that, you hear it in the different departments, and it's cancer that, that they jump on the bandwagon about everything that's gone wrong, and they kind of wallow in that. And they do the same thing with their mental health. That what's it like to actually be the outlier, be the one that says, I got to be here 8 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, 36 hours. And I need to make those the best hours that I can make them, given that so much of my time is out of my control. But what is in my control, I'm going to control.
Mm-hmm.
That shift, and a lot of times it makes one unpopular.
Yeah.
So I want to touch on, I want you to talk about that.
Yeah. God, I'm not sure where to start, but when we talk about, self-care and prioritizing yourself, that can make you very unpopular too. So when in my case at work, once I was diagnosed and realized what was going on, I really needed to kind of peel the onion and shed off a lot of these things that were causing me a lot of stress. So I dropped a lot of the things that I was involved with at work. Right. And that gave the impression that I wasn't involved, or I wasn't prioritizing work, or I wasn't caring about work. But the reality is that I was making myself a priority. And I have no, I'm not going to apologize at all, because that's what I had to do for my own self-care. If people were talking, and you're right, it's like a cancer. People start talking, and I am guilty of this myself. And sometimes I slip into it, and I have to tell myself, hey, this isn't going to help. This is just going to make me feel worse. And sometimes I just stand up and have to leave the conversation. So yeah, I think that's really common in a lot of places. But I think if you really get sucked into that, which I think you're more susceptible to that if you have some type of mental impairment from trauma already.
Yep.
Your fuse is shorter. You're more anxious. You're more likely to get angry. In my case, I was. So I became really susceptible to that mindset, which just made me feel worse and just kind of got me tunneling lower, like deeper and deeper in that tunnel. And you kind of I lost sight of what was happening to me. Like I said, I didn't realize the trouble that I was in. And often you need someone to reach in and grab you and kind of like, hey, you're going down a pretty bad path here. Snap out of it. Like what, no one, you can complain and bitch about stuff, and, but it's really not going to do anything good. I always think there's 3 things that you can do. If you're not happy with your job, there's 3 things you can do. You can try to make it better. Be smart about it. Like complaining about stuff isn't, bring different solutions to a problem that you're seeing to your supervisors. If they choose to ignore you, which they may, because they've labeled you as a naysayer. But if you do, and that works, then great. The other choice is that you can, which is difficult, just choose to not let it bother you. Think of it as a water coming down your back if you're a duck kind of thing. It's just let it go. Don't give it energy. And their third choice is to quit. Yeah. Right? That's your third choice. And I tell people, try those 3 things. And if the first 2 don't work, then become a basket weaver or something. We never talk about that in first responders, because we identify, I'm a cop. That's who I am. I'm a firefighter. That's who I identify with. I can't do anything else. But I'd rather be a basket weaver and alive and spend time with my grandkids than to continue being a firefighter and commit suicide at the age of 50. Right. So it's a tough decision, and it's something that people don't realize, or switch jobs. You can quit that job and switch to another job. But wallowing in it and really being in that negative mindset is not doing anybody good, especially you. Right. And I don't think that's positive.
So when you talk about self-care, it is interesting that the connotation goes to selfish.
Yeah.
When the truth is, it's self-preserving.
Mm-hmm.
and trying to help people understand that we need to be self-preserving, to get on a plane, first you put the oxygen over yourself, then
Yeah.
it really is understanding that we need to be okay ourselves before we can really start to truly help somebody else. Have you had anybody close to you that has died by suicide?
Yes.
Can I ask the impact?
Yeah, it was very impactful because this is a guy that I knew for a long time. He started a mental health program that is now actually flourishing in Canada, OSI Can. He was actually a speaker speaking about post-traumatic growth on my first conference. And so, yeah, when he took his life, we were all pretty surprised. I knew that, when we talk about post-traumatic growth, it's not, you're impaired, you get back and you're in this post-traumatic growth phase. You're not there all the time. You're not a mental superhero where, yeah, I'm a mind master. No, it's still up and down. And so in his case, he was having his ups and downs and he got down too low and took his life. And that was very impactful for many of us, for sure.
I think there's also this factor that you lose some emotional insulation when somebody who you look up to, somebody who lectures, somebody who understands the psychological effects of the career takes their own life.
Mm-hmm.
Because that insulation that says, holy shit, am I really okay? Could that happen to me?
Yeah.
And that really rattles people on a very different level. Anybody then say, I saw it coming, or was that one of those things where everybody said, holy shit, didn't see it?
I do know some examples of people that had no idea it was coming. And I've done artwork about that as well. But we're so shocked and surprised when we hear of these emergency workers taking their lives because we had no idea they were suffering. So I've done a lot of art pieces, the false okay and things where and I was in that same position where we think we're going to work, we're putting on our I'm okay suit every day, going to work, but we have our death plan at the same time. Right. So and that's really scary. Those are the people, and that's why I talk about my own story. That's why I do this artwork, because I want people to know that, you're not alone and there's ways out. But the people that I have talked to that were in that space, and I can speak on my own behalf, it's not that we want to, sounds weird, but it's not that we want to end our lives. It's not that we want to leave our families and leave our friends. Mm-hmm. It's we just don't want to feel anything anymore. It's when you have this mental trauma, it is this crushing feeling, like this thing you're fighting against constantly, like 24 hours a day. It's worse at night because when you're sleeping, you can't consciously defend yourself. Right. So you wake up and you just feel like shit. You feel the worst, for me. Yeah. And then I'm defending myself all day. And while you're doing that, you're pretending that everything is okay. So it's just a constant effort.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. So it's the people that I've talked to, that were at that point. And I've had a couple of people say that it's the, God, what word did they use? It was the, they said it was like a cozy blanket, like suicide was this cozy blanket, or the relief of suicide, right? Where it's like, I just don't want to feel anything anymore. And that's a little bit of insight, for people that are so, how could they do that? How could they leave their family and friends? How selfish of them. Oof. Well, you don't know what, if you were under a constant barragement constantly, and you have the opportunity to step out of that car to get some relief, you're going to do it. Right. So I think the thing is to try to relieve them of that constant pressure.
I get disheartened, and that's probably a nice word, when I listen to people talk about it being a coward's way out.
Yeah.
There's no words, because that's not, to me, to be able to kill oneself isn't a cowardice act. It is an act that that person really believed was their best choice.
Mm-hmm.
And that they have gone through it in their mind so many different times, and that the end result is this is the best decision for everyone. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what people don't understand, is that the clarity that they have is situational clarity.
Yeah.
In a mind that's now been put together, that's so troubled that that's
Mm-hmm.
their logical answer.
Yeah.
Logically, if that.
Yeah. And I remembered I had two emergency workers, one from the United States and one from England, and they must have seen something, but they both emailed me and they were both saying that they were wishing for the sweet life of suicide, is what they said. They want the sweet life of suicide. So it's not that they wanted to die. They just wanted to change what was happening to them. And they didn't realize that there was other options for them. So yeah, the mindset is really, your brain chemistry has changed. You've lost the capacity to think of other solutions because there's shame in it. You don't want to talk to anybody about it. So you're doing it all by yourself. So yeah, it's really sad. So I'm no longer surprised when emergency workers take their lives. People say we had no idea. That doesn't surprise me anymore because I'm like, yeah, we're really good at hiding it from people until we make that decision. Like, well, I just can't defend myself anymore. I give up, and that's giving up. And that's, what have they gone through before that to get to that point?
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Did you see the movie Men in Black?
Yeah.
I talked about this last show. I mean, and that neutralizer at the end,
Mm-hmm.
Where after, they've been fighting these aliens or whatever, and I forget the character's name, that he now leaves and gets the neutralizer, forgets everything, and he's in a Hawaiian shirt and a pair of shorts, and you just think,
wouldn't that be great?
God, I wish that for you guys. I wish that you could gain all the goodies and all the experience without the emotional trauma, so that you get the compassion. When they talk about first responders being so cold, the numbness, the detached, I mean, that comes along with the post-traumatic stress. And yet, in some ways, I feel that really is the armor for the fact that you guys are raw. I put you in front of a Hallmark movie. I put you in front of a Homecoming. Animals or whatever. It's just, as one of my patients will say, it's the ugly cry.
Mm-hmm.
And feeling like there's something wrong when you guys leak, kind of like the Tin Man.
Mm-hmm.
That somehow first responders forgot that crying was human. That having emotions is what separates us out from any other animal. And yet, it's what we almost beat the shit out of ourselves for having and showing.
Yeah, well, for emergency workers, we can't be that way in emergencies. So it's difficult for us to turn it on and turn it off.
Absolutely.
Right. So I can't go to a car accident where a whole family's been killed and start bawling and crying. Like, how functional am I going to be? Right. So we have to be able to turn that off. Mm-hmm. And I know a common sign for, when the stress starts to build up is people just start crying for no reason.
Yes.
I would drive home and just start bawling. I was at a meeting at work and I would start crying. And I'm like, guys, I have no idea why I'm crying. I don't know what's happening, but I would just get super emotional for no reason. It's like it's overflowed. So it's difficult for us because we have to turn it off. And it could be a matter of an hour of us, trying to resuscitate a child. And within that hour, we're at home, hugging our wife and kids. We need some transition time for that. Right. So, and it potentially could take days to get back to normal, but we go to work every day. If we're doing it, depending on the schedule, doing 4 on 4 off, and then you're never going to recover. So it's difficult to to not turn the emotions or to turn the emotions back on, because we wouldn't be able to function at work. When you talk about that neutralizer thing, which would be great.
Oh yeah.
Something that drives me crazy is people like, well, just be happy about it. Just stop being depressed. Just stop being.
Put on a happy face.
I'm like, yeah, just put on a happy face. It's why, people would ask me, Dan, why is your work so, so depressed? Why is that one so graphic? Why can't you just do happy pictures about emergency work? I'm like, well, hey, first off, I don't do the artwork for you, right? I do the artwork for me. I'm not trying to do artwork to represent happiness. Like, this is my personal. This is how I process the things that I see. This is how I purge them. I'm not doing it for you. This isn't for you. I'm not trying to produce happy artwork for people. I'm very proud to be a paramedic and firefighter, but this is my own artwork. I'm not, so when people say that, I'm like, yeah, you just don't get it. This artwork isn't for you. Please don't follow my page. Please don't follow me on social media. Please don't email me again. You just don't get it.
Don't email me again.
Yes.
Just lose my address.
Yeah. They just don't get it.
When did you first start using artwork in your own life for anything, not even for this? When did you realize that this was kind of the venue for you that helped you process out whatever, even as a kid? When did that kind of ruminate?
Yeah, I think I used to play guitar, but I'm not really good at it, so no one really cares. But it's part of my therapy too. So I kind of have that artsy side. And before I was diagnosed, I was kind of dabbling in photography, taking pictures of my dogs and landscapes and that kind of stuff. And then through our therapy, it was kind of suggested that, hey, maybe you can stage these memories that you have, photograph them, and try to recreate how you felt. I'm like, yeah, that's great. And the first one I did, I bawled. I'm like, oh, this sucks. It was tough.
What was your first one?
My very first one was 2. It was the picture of in the back of the ambulance. This first picture is these 2 guys working on this guys. They're doing CPR in the back. Now this is back about 2015, about 5 years ago. And then the second picture is the paramedic. He's got his gloved hands on his head, which is disgusting. And I know that, but I did that on purpose. The patient has a sheet over his head. He's dead. And the spirit of the patient sitting in the airway seat looking at the paramedic. Right. So that was based on a call that I did. That's a long time ago. I did that call, and it was one of the things that really stuck in my mind for a long time. So that was the first one that I did. And it was super cathartic. It was like I called these memories or these things that I call them monsters that invade my consciousness uninvited. They just pop into mind, these memories. And that's what I used for motivation for my artwork. So in that picture, when I was done, it was like I trapped that organic memory that came uninvited into this picture, right? So when I was done, it wasn't in my mind anymore, because now I associated that memory with that picture. That's not moving. It's not doing anything. It's trapped now. So it was very healing and cathartic for me to do that. So the artwork that I do, like those ones, the ones that are really, like even that one that you saw about the death notification, that's based on an actual call that I did a long time ago that really stuck with me. They're all very personal to me. Yeah, people still think I make this artwork for them, right? Which is fine, right? So, but if you don't like it, then don't look at it.
If it's okay, I'm going to go onto your website, and
Sure.
I want to talk about it because I just absolutely love it. So you can help me navigate.
Sure.
Do
you want me to show you? I'll show you my favorite picture.
Sure.
The one for me when I create the artwork, I have the feeling in the emotion.
Okay.
And an image pops into my mind, and the most relate or the closest I can get to that initial feeling in my mind to the final image, then I feel I'm most authentic as an artist in that process. And I'll show you the most, and now it's pretty graphic. I'm going to warn people that this picture might be triggering. It might be.
So do you want me to unshare me and then you'll share yours? Is that what?
Oh, no, you could. It's on my webpage.
Okay, go ahead.
But I just want to warn people that it's, I don't censor my artwork. I don't.
So,
I have to stay authentic.
so I believe that my audience, I think they know I'm pretty real. I think they know I'm pretty raw, and that the guests that I select, that we don't filter stuff.
Yeah.
We've got a nurse every week that comes on from Oklahoma. God bless her. We've got survivors, parents of suicide. We've got officers, firefighters. So this will ruminate with them. If this ruminates with me, this
Yeah.
touches them. So
And for those that have, and I'll explain the picture, for those of you that have been there, this might really strike a nerve, but know that, you know, I've been there too, and many of us have, and that's why I created the arc. So if you go to the galleries and go to EMS,
Yep.
and just click on the EMS gallery. And I think it's just scroll through the pages there. Okay, it's the second row, first on the left.
this one.
That one. Now make that full screen. If you can, you just double click on it. Yeah. So this is called The Demon Eats the Ambulance Driver.
Oh, look at that.
All right. So this is, and I called it the ambulance driver on purpose. That's a very derogatory term for paramedics, and we don't like that. But this paramedic is no longer an ambulance driver. He's not defending himself. This is the point when you decide to take your life. This is the point where you give up. This is the point where you are literally being consumed by your demon, that you can no longer defend yourself from this guy, that you are like, fine, take me, I'm done. I don't have the energy to defend myself anymore. So this picture most accurately depicts for me the moment you take your life of suicide, where you are literally being consumed by your demons. And I go through this in my lecture. And so people that have been there, where they feel that, yeah, this is, because the demon's big, the demon's dark, the claws are like gripping in. One of my favorite artists is a Spanish guy, De Goya. He's this great Spanish artist that I like for many reasons, but he did a painting called Saturn Devours His Sons. And that's what kind of gave me the idea of this picture. But this is this demon. And I use angels and demons to represent trauma and recovery in my artwork. So this one's very, very powerful for me. Now I've just got out of this one, and I always follow this picture up with another one.
Okay.
So if you just hit I think the X on the top right there. Oh, the other, yeah, that one. And I want you to show, I'm going to show you one called Finding Peace. And I always show these two together. And I think it's might be on the first page. And it's the cover of one of my books. No, I guess it's on the third page. Nope. It's on the next page, I think.
4.
Nope. Try page 5.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. It's the third row, second in. This
Yes.
one. So this one's called Finding Peace. So when I do this lecture, I show that first picture, then I show this picture. Now this picture also looks like a sad picture, but if you look really closely in the top right-hand side, there's a devil there, and his head is up and his arms are up and he's screaming. It's very faint. I don't know if you can see that, but I ghosted him in there because he's fading away. And this devil, no, he's smaller. He doesn't have the grips on this paramedic, because this paramedic is getting the help that he needs. Now, I used angels and demons to represent recovery and trauma. So in this case, this angel could be your therapist, could be your wife, could be your coworker, could be whatever it is that is pulling you out of that grasp. Now, in real life, this is a father and son in real life. And where the angel's connecting with the paramedic, it's not translucent. The rest of him is translucent, but on his forehead and his hand, it's solid. Right. So when I do these two, when I share these two pictures together, you know, it doesn't have to be like that first picture. But the secret is you first need to realize that you're not by yourself. Well, you first have to realize that you're in trouble, and that, you know, having a suicide plan isn't really the only option. And then the second part is to, you know, here there is help out there, whatever that help looks like for you. You just have to find, and sometimes it's really difficult to find what that help is. And maybe it is religion. Maybe it is,
Right.
It could be lots of different things, but you need to ask for help and get help, and it's there. It's very supportive community for emergency workers. And I end off with this. I don't always want to leave off on that. The death eats the ambulance driver. And my reality is this: it's finding peace and getting the recovery that you need, and then thriving to the post-traumatic growth phase.
Galleries. When you talk about, now here's a picture. This I actually have in my office. Talk about that, because this is all of them.
Yes. Yeah. So I did this one. These are all my images are staged. None of them are, I don't bring the camera with me in the back of the ambulance or on fires. I don't do that. They're based on experiences that I've had or emotions that I've had. And I use my peers to stage them and photograph. Then I digitally draw and paint on top of the photograph. So this is in Las Vegas. So these are paramedics, firefighters, police officers, nurses that still work in Las Vegas. And this is called torn. So in this case, you look at the face of the paramedic in the middle, and he's completely indifferent. He doesn't care which way he goes. He doesn't care. He just wants it to be over. He's exhausted, right? So he doesn't care if he goes to the devil side. The devil's fighting. He wants to get him. But his peers on the right-hand side are trying to pull him away. So there's another paramedic, there's a police officer there's a firefighter and a nurse that are pulling for their peer. And the reason I wanted to do this one, that it's not just, paramedics and firefighters and police. It's, once you have that trauma, it doesn't matter how you got it. In my opinion, once you're impaired, and I don't know if even impaired is the right word for it, but once you've have the symptoms of mental trauma or mental injury, then the results are similar.
And I think adding to that, we always kind of tease about, firemen and police and kind of, what goes on between the two of them, which is entertaining. Mm-hmm. But what this picture shows is truly the essence, which is when a brother or sister is in trouble, no matter what they are wearing.
Yeah.
Everybody, every first responder, every care worker will try and save them.
Yeah. And that's the idea of this picture. It's about peer support, which is a whole other topic and a whole other definition, what that means. But for me, peers are, police officers are my peers, nurses are my peers, people that are in emergency services that are exposed to that emergency trauma. They're my peers and they get it. So they don't have to be a paramedic alone. They don't have to be a firefighter. Now, many of us, may feel only comfortable speaking with other paramedics or firefighters or military. But for me, if somebody if they've acquired this mental trauma, even as in the military, I'm not in the military, never was, but, if they're having the symptoms that I was having, then I can relate to them. So they're my peer. I think that's my opinion.
The other thing that I don't know if our viewers are seeing is that on the devil, when you look at him now, I've got anger, fear, shame, anguish, and what is that pain? Yeah.
So those are all kind of the symptoms that I was experiencing. Steph, I got to plug my computer in. It's about to die. I have my whole thing set up here, but I forgot to plug it in. But those are all the symptom. That's what I mean. I use the devils as a sign of trauma, right? And those are the symptoms that I was having. So just give me 1 second.
Yep. And then I'm gonna go to
before my computer dies.
Some of there's one that's going to be in the EMS one. I have a feeling that is in the ambulance. Here's one. where you've got all the ghosts. So tell me when you're plugged in.
Wow, that's horrible.
There we go. Perfect.
Did you hear that?
Yep.
That was awful.
I got you now.
Okay.
So here we've got all the ghosts that are in the back of this ambulance, which is just so powerful as well, that all of those ghosts live in the back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've done a couple images like this where, where the back of the ambulance is kind of our office and our, I don't want to say our happy place, but I would much rather work on maybe it's our safe place. I'd much rather work on a patient if I have time to get them out of the house and away from their family and back to the ambulance. I'll do it, because then I can close the door. We're not going to be disturbed. There's not going to be any distractions. I know where everything is. I'm comfortable there. But then I think of all the things that we've done in the back of the ambulance, all the people that have died back there. And that although it's our safe place, it's often where a lot of these traumas exist for us.
Demon.
So I've done a few of these pictures. Fly on the wall. One of our ambulances were we were decommissioning it because it was just miled out, and I worked the last shift on that ambulance, and I worked on that ambulance for years and years and years. And I'm thinking, oh man, all the memories that I have in this ambulance alone are a lot, let alone all the other paramedics that I've had. So I did a picture, fly on the wall, or if these walls could speak, of all the things that have happened in the back of that ambulance. Even though that's where I feel most comfortable on emergency calls.
I found, hang on. Where is the one with the angel in the back?
And I hide a lot of stuff, a lot of pictures that I do. People don't even know some of the things that are in there. Like that one you saw the other day of the death notification, the Grim Reaper's walking in the front door. I don't know if anyone has noticed that. Mm-hmm.
Love that.
Yeah. So this is about support. And in real life, this couple is engaged, and they're both paramedics. But this idea is like, yeah, you might feel by yourself, you might feel alone, but you have support. Again, that angel is support and therapy and treatment and recovery, whatever that looks like to you. But the message here is that you may seem like you're by yourself, like he's not aware that she's there.
Yeah.
But the message is that, yeah, it's there. You just need to ask for it or
even
get
feel
it.
it. It's not uncommon. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this out. Incredible. Is that sixth sense, that I ask people to tap into. It is when you feel alone. I just had my sister-in-law, her mom was dying, and her mom did not want to see her, and she's in a hospital and in hospice in the hospital, and mom just did not want to be there. And I said to her, I'm like, feel her. She will pass through you when she goes. It's trusting that sixth sense. It's that when you feel alone, which is so difficult, when we have officers that die by suicide, those survivors are, sitting back saying, why didn't he call? And I say to them, I have over 2,000 contacts in my phone. And there are days that I scroll down that phone and I think, I have nobody to call.
Mm-hmm.
It's really kind of getting in touch with this other side where you can feel that person, where you allow yourself to be felt, so that fiance or that other person, for you, probably your wife, and not everybody is the enemy.
And it's that's not easy, right? Especially for emergency workers, because we're supposed to be these infallible heroes that can go into these emergencies and save the day. How can we let ourselves be vulnerable that way? How can we? So it's difficult for us to admit that maybe we're having these difficult emotions. And then stigma is another huge topic, right? And that's a real thing where, there's a legitimate recourse or legitimate
Potential.
reason to be scared. Potential where, if a firefighter or police officer comes forward to the supervisor, they could be blackballed or fired. That is a real thing. So I think if you do want to reach out, you got to be really, really careful who you're reaching out to.
Absolutely.
That's why so many emergency workers don't want to utilize their employment assistance programs because they're worried that it's going to get them fired, or it's a whole other thing, right? On top of everything else, right? So on top of all the other stuff that they're dealing with,
right,
you're worried about that, which is horrible. Like the pressure and the extra difficulties with that are really.
When I had founded CopLine, one of the reasons that it was so important for me to do this right was that we were not going to be a rescue line that traced calls. That if we had a line that did not allow for officers to talk about suicide, then we were doing a disservice.
Yeah.
Because if you talk about suicide, everybody's fears, oh God, if you talk about suicide, or if you ask them if they're thinking of killing themselves, that you're going to put the idea into their head. And actually, it's quite the contrary, both in my office and on these lines, when these retired officers are trained and vetted, and it's not a comfortable subject, nor is it comfortable to do the role plays where you ask the caller if they're thinking of killing themselves, and the caller says yes. And it's like, it's that, oh shit, it's that pucker factor. But being very comfortable, crazy enough at this stage of my career, is I'm very comfortable with the answer of being yes. And that really sends an amazing message to be able to talk about something that people just don't get to talk about. And it allows them to finally process out those emotions and feelings safely. And if they can't, they're not going away. They're not putting on that happy face. They are just shoving it down until they can't shove it anymore. And then they're going.
I'm more worried about the people that don't say anything.
I'm with you.
Right. The people that don't call you or don't reach out. Those are the people that, holy smokes, I had no idea that they're even suffering. Right. That those are the people that I know are out there, that are scared to come forward to anybody. Yeah. Right. And they just live with their pain until they just can't.
Or first responders that can't imagine thinking that, how somebody could be suicidal. I mean, that also kind of makes me a little nervous. I'm like, you've never thought, maybe not about dying, about just maybe going to sleep, cryogenically being frozen and kind of waking up when the shit show's over with?
Yeah.
Who hasn't thought about that? But so.
Yeah. I think it's like, you're driving in a car, and the music sucks. The seat's uncomfortable. The people in the car that you're with, they're horrible. They're farting and burping, and they're the driver's drunk, and they're smoking inside the car, and you're like, God, I just want to get the hell out of this car. This is horrible. And there's no way I can get out. I can't get out of this car. So you just open the door and jump out. That doesn't seem like a bad idea, right? But if people are, I don't know if that's a fair analogy, but it's, that's kind of how I think some people feel, where it's like they just want to get out of this car.
So is there anything that you wanted to cover or talk about that I didn't touch on that you'd want first responders to know? Anything about a symposium coming up for you? Your friend's death notification class out in California, now that everything's kind of virtual. Awesome to be able to sign up and take courses. I'll tell you, that's one thing that COVID has done, is to me, it's opened up a world that so many people couldn't necessarily afford to participate in because they couldn't afford the travel expenses that are now being done on Zoom.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah, there's, this COVID's really kind of halted my public speaking, so to speak. But, I've been doing a lot of lectures as well. But yeah, we do. My friend Alexandra, she's going for a PhD, and she's doing her thesis. I think she just announced that her research is going to be on the effects of ketamine on firefighters for mental trauma, which I think is going to be. I'm excited to read that research paper. But she's also developed a death notification course, so she specializes in death notification and resiliency. So I know she did a lot of work in her master's with that.
What's her last?
So he's it's Jabr, Alexandra Jab. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Jabr.
Okay.
Yeah, she's on Facebook and
Great.
And she's got her company, and so that's great that she's developed that program because I received maybe 3 minutes of death notification training, right? And that's why I did that picture last week, which resounded with a lot of different people. But every couple of years, or we were doing it every year, but now we're gonna do it every second year. Then I put on a symposium. So we were gonna do a symposium in Las Vegas, then we're invited to go do it in Australia. But COVID kind of got in the way. And it's a post-traumatic growth symposium where I invite 6 of my peers. They're not public speakers. They're fellow emergency workers that have experienced post-traumatic growth. So speakers in the past were paramedics from the Las Vegas shooting, firefighters from 9/11 in New York, people that have really been through these traumatic experiences and are now thriving because of it. And I get them to speak to their peers, which will, and they're not special. They're no different than anybody else. So they come in and they share those experiences. I have my next 6 speakers already lined up whenever we're allowed to do conferences again.
Right.
And then we also we're going to plan to do a suicide awareness walk every year. So when I was in Australia, one of the schools there was doing a suicide awareness walk, and they had their students, they just walked in a lap, and they had teams. So as long as one person on the team was walking for this 24 hours, and I went there and walked with them for a bit, and it was a really fun event, which sounds weird, but it was great. So all these kids, they had these t-shirts on with like a friend of theirs that maybe, took their life, but they were honoring them, and they were bringing awareness to suicide in this fun way. All these teams they dressed up in costumes, and, there was bands playing and, speakers that were talking about suicide and awareness. And it was a really fun, positive 24-hour event where, they had tents, and, we were going to do it here. I'm going to rent movie screens, and we'll have movies playing all night. And so we're going to do that once we're allowed to do these big gatherings again. So we'll be alternating the suicide awareness walk and our peer recovery resiliency post-traumatic growth symposium. And I'll be promoting all that stuff on my web pages when the time comes.
Terrific. And people want to follow you?
If you just Google Dansun, DANSUN, I'll pop up all over the place. My Facebook page is usually where I put most of my stuff first. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter as well, but I can't put as much narrative on Twitter. So when I do post new images, I always include the narrative, which is kind of the motivation why I created that picture. So if you want to follow my artwork, just Google me. If you're on Facebook, Dansun, and Instagram, I know lots of people there. And
thank you.
And the great thing about that is if you follow me on Facebook, for example, like that picture from last week, that death notification,
yes,
I think there was over 300 comments on that. So you can read what other people around the world are thinking, which gives us all the sense that we're not alone. There's a paramedic in South Africa who can relate to that picture.
Yeah.
So you're not alone if you're in, some small town in, Utah or something. You're a volunteer paramedic that can relate to, advanced care paramedic in Johannesburg or something that, you got the same results of the work that you're doing, right? And that gives you a sense of community and gives you a little bit of comfort, I hope.
Thank you. Thank you for finding your niche.
I'm lucky. I'm very lucky.
And being able to help so many others, people that for you will remain nameless, faceless, and everything else, that you have touched so many lives. And thank you for sharing it today on Steph Therapy 911. And
No, thanks, Steph. Thanks for having me on your show. This was really fun.
absolutely. So stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see everybody next Sunday on Steph Therapy 911.